Namaste, and welcome to Acharya Shunya's podcast, Shadow to Self, a show created to inspire you to step out of fear and darkness into a place of freedom and empowerment. In each episode, she'll explore humanity's deepest questions about your relationship with yourself and others, illuminated by the ancient and non-dual wisdom of the Vedas, Upanishads, and Bhagavad Gita. Keep listening.
Janaki tvam namasyami sarva papa pranashinim. Janaki tvam namasyami sarva papa pranashinim. Indeed, O Janaki, goddess Sita, beloved daughter of Janak, we bow to you again and again, and we ask that you destroy all the shadows within us. You dissolve our inner darkness. Welcome, dear listeners of Shadow to Self Season 2, where the theme is Yoga Burns Again. Today we gather around one of the oldest surviving epics in the world, the Ramayana. And at the center of this epic is the tale of a noble prince, the crown prince of Ayodhya, Rama, and how he was exiled just the day before he was to become coronated as the king. His beloved wife, Sita, accompanied him. She didn't have to, but she chose to, from love, from friendship, from devotion, and from her deep commitments to be the true partner of Rama. They spent 13 years in the forest. But in the last year, sadly, Sita was abducted by a demonic king who was filled with lust for her. He imprisoned her in a beautiful garden in the city of Lanka, the Ashokavatika. And he tried everything to woo her, to convince her, to threaten her, intimidate her so that she could be his possession. But Sita chose not weapons, not anger, not screams, but resolve to keep him at bay. And that resolve was enough. Finally, she was rescued by her husband Rama, and they all returned to Ayodhya. But before she could return to Ayodhya, she had to walk through the fire, a test of her purity, because Rama demanded it. You have lived for so many days as a possession of a demonic, lusty king who knew no Dharma. Are you the same person who left my side? Are you returning pure? And Sita willingly walked through that fire, willingly returned to Ayodhya, and all was well, and the good news spread that Sita is pregnant. But yet once again, whispers rose again of rumors, of doubts, of gossip. And Rama, more loyal to the public opinion or more sensitive to it than to his love, commitment, and security to Sita, perhaps, sent her away to the forest once more, there in exile. Sita gives birth to twins and raises them with wisdom, courage, dignity, poise as a single woman. To many of us, this episode is painful. When the boys are grown and finally reunited with their father, Sita is asked yet once again to prove her innocence, but this time she refuses. She will not return to Ayodhya. Instead, she calls upon her true mother, because it is said that Sita was found in a furrow, and her true mother is Mother Earth, so she calls upon her true mother, Mother Earth, Prithvi Ma, to take her home. And the earth opens, and she returns to where she began. And this is the story we inherited. And over time, it was softened, sanitized, sweetened, domesticated, patronized, and Sita has become a symbol of obedience. Sita was, in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of people that I work with closely and discuss about the Sita, Sita was never obedient. She was simply a superconscious being. She made hard choices, not easy ones. She endured, and not out of weakness, but out of awakened strength. And her story is not just about suffering, it's about sovereignty. Her defiance of the one she loved and adored, and to say, no, I will not give that test again. And instead, I will go back to where I belong. That is something. That no is a holy no. And that brings us here to this episode of the podcast. To reclaim Sita as the spiritual warrior that she is, the hidden yogini, the divine feminine force who walked through rejection and silence with dignity and came home to herself. And to support this remembering, this celebration of Sita, I've invited 4 spiritual colleagues, fellow creators of a powerful audio project called Sitayana. This offering, the Sitayana, brings to life 24 sacred passages of Sita's journey through the Ramayana, each one inviting us to feel, reflect, and awaken a facet of the feminine power, the feminine know within us all. And it is not a retelling, it's a re-embodiment, a way to honor the Sita, the true Sita in that story, and to see her with fresh eyes that can really appreciate the nuances of her journey and not simply rush to patronize her with the epithet of, wow, look at her, the obedient wife. So today you will meet those visionaries who are towering teachers, artists, and opinion makers in their own right. I'd like to begin with inviting a dear friend and a beautiful soul, Michael Sternfeld. He's the man behind Sitayana, who has spent decades listening deeply to the Ramayana, not just as a story, but as a living transmission. Welcome. And I'd just like to say something about you, just briefly. Michael Sternfeld is a producer behind Sitayana, and he has a background in dance and over 400 media productions to his name, including projects for the David Lynch Foundation. He brings artistry and depth to everything he touches. His complete audio production of Valmiki's Ramayana won the NEH Outstanding Project of the Year. Through his platform, Vedic Audio Knowledge, Michael brings ancient stories to modern ears with devotion and care. And I can say this to you that, Michael, it has been such a joy and such a learning experience to be able to work alongside you and the team you put together. And I feel like I'm talking and everybody wants to hear your voice, but I'm just going to point out this, that she has been a goddess who has been wrapped up in centuries of silence and patriarchal sanctity. And you not only worshipped her or revered her, but then you dared to reveal her in true light. And here you are, a man, a white man, in today's world where your position is questionable just because of the body you adorn. But I have to say that conceiving of bringing Sita forth as a central voice of the Ramayana was a great act of Vedic devotion. Thank you. And you did it. And here we are, benefiting from the fruit of all of your work and your tapasya. So please talk to us. And why did you feel it was time to tell her story? And what did you discover about your inner Sita through the process? Probably these are my two questions.
Thank you, Acharya, for that beautiful welcome. And always, you frame things so beautifully, such a deep understanding that frames things in a way that people can now see the overall context. First of all, I'll say about being a male and a white male, the Ramayana is a universal. It's completely universal. And Ram and Sita, this is for all devotees or all people who cleave to this knowledge. Ram and Sita take anyone who come with a pure heart and devotion. So that's why I never think the fact that I'm white or male. Universal values of the Ramayana make it so special and why it stood the test of time. I think one great teacher once said, that which lasts longest is closest to the truth. The Ramayana passed the tests for truth by that standard. So there's the outer value of why I took on this project, but there's more important, I think what you wanted to hear is the inner value. On the outer value, I've been working with the Ramayana for 30 some years now, doing multiple productions like the complete recording of the Valmiki Ramayana. When that was released, I realized 75-hour-long audio production, it's the world's longest audiobook, is too long for most people, especially these days. I needed to do these distillations. So the first one was Ram's Dharma, focusing on Ram's Dharma and leadership secrets in the Ramayana. And the second one was with Krishnadas, a collaboration on Hanuman's leap of faith. And that came out of a course that I taught on the Ramayana for the NKB ashram in Taos. I met Krishnadas through that. And of course, with him, all you have to do is suggest Hanuman, and he wanted to do it with me. And through that, I met Nina Rao, who's Krishnadas's manager and musical partner. And I'd had a thought in the back of my mind. First of all, I wanted to complete the trilogy, Ram, Hanuman, Sita. So that was inevitable. But now I'll tell you something that I've hardly told anyone, because I feel it's time to be a little more personal, which is about 20 years ago, I had a reading with a Jyotishi, a Vedic astrologer. And she said out of the blue that your chart is so powerful, but there's something out of the symmetry. Venus, Shukra, is out of the symmetry in your chart. And in 20 years from now, when you go into Venus Mahadas, you will be devoting your whole life to bringing out the most nourishing, powerful values of womankind and restoring them in the center of the center. I would just keep it simple like that. I thought she was crazy. I didn't believe it. At that time, I was just Ram's Dharma, Mariyato Purushottam Ram. I couldn't conceive that that's what I would be doing. And I completely forgot this. I went into Venus Mahadasa a few years ago, and all of a sudden, I still didn't remember the prophecy. And the Ramayana, is filled with prophecies, things that happened. So I'm a living Ramayana playing out in my life. And all of a sudden, I just had this thought to do this. And then it unfolded. And then later, after we released it, I remembered the prophecy. And that is why I'm doing this. And the greatest thrill I'm getting, now to wrap this up, is it's the service. In the beginning, we wanted to emphasize Sita's voice, the power and potency. When you just take out the passages of Sita from the Valmiki Ramayana, let them stand on their own, a whole new story emerges. And when we did this, we realized her power. Now the whole table is turning. I can't even imagine the Ramayana being told without Sita as the equal partner of Ram. I can't even conceive it. And now the main blessing I get from this is the feedback I'm getting from the women and everyone who's listening, how this is restoring their faith. They were in conflict between their love and adoration of Ram, their devotion to Ram, and Ram's treatment of Sita. This has brought that together. And I hope that's deeply symbolic in the world of this unification of the sacred masculine and feminine. So my gratification is just every woman's heart, every person's heart who is healed through this production is also healing my own heart. And by the way, even though we gave it the name Sitayana as the kind of the broader brushstroke, the name of the production actually is Sita's Gems, the gems of Sita, each facet of her being radiating through our own heart. Did I answer your question?
That's so beautiful, and it really touched me. I say to my students often that sometimes the goddess gets you, like she takes a hold of you, and then she wants you to do her bidding. And clearly, she chose you, Michael, and you become a recipient of gifts while you give gifts.
I remember during the production, I contacted you and I said, Acharya, the purification is too great. This is really stretching me. And you said, don't worry, Michael, the best is yet to come. I remember that. And it really sustained me. So thank you so much for giving me that. Just the wisdom in your voice when you said it is the thing that really touched me.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for listening to your heart and for allowing a prophecy to just unfold the way it has to. And it has really been an honor to be with you in the Sita's Gems and all the co-creators who came along. So we'll come right back to you, and we will also listen to an actual segment from the audio production, right? Do you want to just briefly touch upon what's coming up for our listeners?
Well, how about if I bring it? I'll give some context right before we play it.
Okay, let's do that then.
Okay?
Yes,
yeah, because then it'll be really fresh in people's mind. Because we wanted to not only are all the commentators did fantastic commentaries on all these passages. I re-recorded the passages. My original Ramayana production was with male voices, and there was no way we were going to have Sita read by male voices for Sita's Gems. So we re-recorded it with women, really good women actresses, 3 different actresses. So that's what we'll be playing later, so you have context here, and then the commentary. Were the commentaries. Thank you, Acharya.
Thank you, Michael. And now I'm honored to welcome a woman whose voice has become a bridge between devotion and awakening worldwide. Nina Rao is a chant leader, musician, and co-host of Sita's Gems, known for her deep connection to sacred sound. She began singing bhajans with her grandfather in South India when she was only 9. And later her path blossomed through chanting with Krishna Das in New York. Since then, she has toured globally with him and released albums of her own too, and anchored her practice in the grace of her guru, Sri Siddhima. Nina also advocates for conservation of the environment and hosts a podcast exploring the sacred link between nature and spirit. So welcome, Nina Ji. What an honor to have you on my podcast. Your voice really carries the sacred thread of bhakti, and sometimes I just tune into you just to listen at the end of the day, and I feel like my vibrations shift from being stuck in some kind of samsaric shadow and awakening to self. So thank you for being my private support system. And I just want to start with saying, you grew up within the currents of a traditional Indian devotional life. And then as a modern woman, you also navigate the Western world. And when you do that, I always see how you hold both aspects of your life together in such a beautiful way, your Eastern upbringing and your Western embodiment, or just kind of being a bridge between the two, you can say. So what attracted you to Sita's Gems, apart from the fact that, and I'm speaking at a personal level, not just as a person who's provided her voice and her music and her support in making it come forward. What is Sita to you personally? What has she done to your own shadows? Because we all have shadows, and whether having a relationship with her has influenced your own cultural, familial, or spiritual perspectives. So share with us Nina's heart and Nina's relationship with Ma Sita.
That's a lot to talk about. I think, I started reading these stories as a child, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and I was always so taken by the central female characters. And while inside I might have felt that something wasn't sitting right with me, I wasn't able to articulate it. I didn't really share this kind of conversation with anybody, but I did keep reading over and over again. And I recognized that I was drawn to the stories because of these feminine characters, their strength and their ability to hold everything. When I look back on it now, I think that's what has been critical in my looking at them as models in my life, is just our life in this realm includes suffering. No matter where we turn, there's going to be suffering of all kinds. And the way in which Sita in particular, and also some of the other female beings like Draupadi, for example, she was also very important for me in my years of reading these sacred texts. But Ma Sita, I think her quiet resolve. You said this in the beginning about, a resolve, a sense of resolve, about where she stood in the face of everything. There was an inner understanding, and she didn't need to be told or affirmed necessarily from the outside. It might look like that in the way in which the story is told, but she knew. The fact that she could keep Ravana away from her simply by standing in her faith and herself and her strength. To me, I think now when I look back on these stories, it's been a very important way in which for me to actually live my own life too. Because being a woman, growing up in India, I think I was very rebellious as a child. I created all kinds of problems for my parents. But my father, I think, might have been one of the most liberated men that I've known in my life, especially from the era and from which he came. And you might have some understanding of this because of the way you were raised as well, Acharya, is that we didn't have any sons in our family. We had 3 daughters, so I'm the oldest. And my father taught me how to do everything a man could do. Everything. We had the education. I could change tires. I could fix things in the house, whatever a man might be called upon to do. And also to speak for myself. There was never a time that came where he said, well, that I would be told what to say or how to behave. And I think that growing up that way and being in this family with my sisters where we had freedom basically to do anything, the issue really was just coming up against the rest of our community. It wasn't even my parents. It was the rest of our community had certain standards. And, I married outside our community. And then I got divorced and I didn't have children. All kinds of things happened at first. And I also didn't pick a career that most women were doing at that time, was either becoming a doctor, an engineer, or whatever that might be. And I ended up going on working on Wall Street. So in all of Sita took a little bit of moved into the background during those early years of my adulthood. But when I went back to it, I kept trying to understand why would it be that she should be pushed into the shadows this way? And unfortunately, the very simple answer is the patriarchy. I didn't want to believe it. Really, I didn't. We come from a country where the goddess is worshipped. The central deity in our family is Saraswati, Sharada Devi. And yet, this is what's happened to the telling of Sita and who she is. And how the story is told now determines who she is. So in rereading and re-finding who she is in these stories, and then coming and meeting Michael Sternfeld and him asking me, what do you think? Now, I want to tell you, Acharya, that before all of this happened, I had already read your book and heard you speaking. And I had started reading other versions of the Ramayana rewritten in more current days and retold in a voice. I was in a voice that I was hiding inside of myself. I didn't dare retell that story in the way I've heard other women like Vrinda and Dina Miriam and Chitra and all these wonderful women have retold the story. And I felt so fortified. And I thought, yes, this is it. It's as simple as that. It was just the patriarchy that was pushing her into the shadows. There was nothing wrong with Sita. I had to relearn who she was. Although inside of me, I felt like I knew that strength in her, but I wasn't so sure. I have to say, I was a little unsure. But then hearing all your voices and affirming where she stood in all of this, I found my voice. And my conclusion to all of this is that Ram and Sita took form in this realm to share something with us as models. And while there are in many different tellings of the Ramayana, like different versions of Sita, and like in the Ramcharitmanas, Tulsidas goes on to say that it wasn't actually the real Sita who went into the fire, it was another form of Sita. Like all kinds of band-aids have been put on to justify the treatment of Sita. I think that the story was told this way because it was going to be retold and we were going to hear it and we were going to understand that what they were showing us is the way things are and how it's not correct. Very simply, Sita took that. She'd made that sacrifice for us to show that the position of women in our humanity in this last yuga, this yuga that we're in, needs to change. And the only way in which they could do that was placing the role of a woman, of the feminine, in such an important telling of divinity that people could see. And it would take a long time to unweave and unravel, but it's a long time in our lifetime. It's not a long time in the eternal cycle of life. So my understanding is that the way that this story was told, and ultimately Sita finding the strength within herself to believe, trust in her heart, trust in herself, even if it was going to be in defiance to Ram's wishes, is the story that needs to be told, so that women can trust themselves and others can learn to trust women as well. Very simple.
Thank you, Nina. That was so powerful because it came from such a vulnerable place. And it compels me to say this, that I find many similarities of my journey growing up in India with yours. And there was this Sita archetype that had been manufactured by the patriarchy within our nation, great nation, and fed to us as little girls. So the first archetype that broke when I too came out of the box of my spiritual family and first married a person I loved, then decided to leave him, then decided to talk about that divorce publicly on every platform I could find. It was this archetype that I betrayed. And if there was any archetype that gave me guilt, it was I'm not Sita. I'm not perfect, because if you're Sita, you listen, you put your head down and you obey. And that was the version fed to me. And I'm very grateful once again to all the authors who are on our Sita's Gems group, and some of them are here. Chitra ji, Mirabai ji, and so many others who wrote these powerful books. And then Roar Like a Goddess came through me almost unasked, which was kind of like the fruit on the cherry on the cake to say, yeah, you flipped the archetype. That was the wrong archetype of obedience. You're actually Sita. Acharya Shunya, you are Sita, and you've said no. And your defiance is a resolve, not an act of rebellion. And something I noticed, Nina Ji, was how she didn't speak that much, but she kind of did what she always wanted. She was told, no, it's not proper to go to the forest, stay in the palace and wait. Oh, I'm going to the forest. She went to the forest. And she could, like you mentioned, hold Ravan at a distance just through her inner fire. And then she said no to Ram. She's like, once I've given the fire test, I cooperated when I want to. And I don't cooperate when I want to. Thank you so much.
Do you feel that you've also done the same? That's how I feel.
I feel that. I feel I'm that person.
Yeah.
I don't think my life was about a rebellion. I think as an Acharya in the 21st century, it's my duty to talk about not staying in toxic relationships. It's my duty to show that you can courageously walk out and you are still whole.
And you're still a good person.
Oh my goodness.
My other thing. This was the other thing. Is like, am I not a good person anymore if I'm not, abiding by this particular way of being? And that was the greatest lesson of all. Is that I'm still.
Nina did temporarily, I'm not a good person, settle in, because it did settle in for me a bit. It's what do you do? What do you do with hundreds and thousands of years of a culture and hundreds of years of your family being a certain way? It did settle in for a bit, but it is once again thanks to the voices around us who've had their own awakening. And then you and I had ours. And now we're adding to this conversation. It's really time for Sitayana. I bid all our listeners to listen to this. If this fog of I'm not good enough has kind of made its way in our hearts, Nina.
It has. And it's not only in India.
Not just in India. Oh,
That's
yes.
the other thing I realized, is that it's everywhere.
Everywhere. That's what I write about in Roar. Like it's like I thought I'll come to America and I'll meet all these liberated women, but we find patriarchy like an insidious virus. It's all over our globe.
I mean, it's on a cellular level. So
yes,
to
yes.
rejuvenate those cells, feed them something else.
Thank you so much, Nina. That was very powerful, and it brought so much healing just to me listening to you. Thank you.
And me.
Now I'm delighted to welcome a mystic whose words have carried seekers across traditions and into the heart of the divine feminine. Mirabai Starr is a best-selling author, translator, and interspiritual teacher. She has spent decades weaving mystical traditions into a tapestry of devotion, of working with grief, and of awakening through darkness. Her books, Wild Mercy, which mesmerized me, by the way, Caravan of No Despair, and Ordinary Mysticism, all these have become guideposts for modern seekers. In 2020, she was named one of the Watkins 100 most spiritually influential living people, and I believe she is. one of those very special peoples. And Mirabai ji, it's such an honor to have you here. And, who better than you would understand Sita's heart? Because Sita was shattered with grief. And from that grief emerged from Sita this inner strength that is centuries later echoing for all of us. You too traverse through a passage of dark grief, but at the end of it, you not only saw light, but you became a giver of light, a sharer of light for all of us. How do you experience her? Not just as a character in a Hindu epic, but as a as a as a universal presence that echoes across spiritual traditions, who you found within you. Her silence, her exile, and then her final return to earth. How does that sit with you? Her fierce dignity, yes, but then her sorrow. And what sorrow does to us, how it transmutes sometimes pain into power, the divine feminine power. I know I'm just rambling right now because I would just like to talk to you for 4 hours on this topic.
Thank you, Acharya, and thanks for inviting me into this illustrious circle, which includes all of you who are listening. Your luminosity is part of what we're up to here. That's the thing about the sacred feminine. It's not about the people up on the stage. It's about the tapestry. As you said, it's about the circle. It's about beloved community, as Martin Luther King and many others call it. When we all come together in this way. Listening to the two of you just now, Acharya and Nina, was so deeply moving to me. And Nina, what you and I together have been for several years speaking about the sacred feminine, both publicly and privately, and looking to Sita especially, and trying to find a way into that story that has been so deeply troubling to both of us, where Sita is not trusted. And to hear you say today that it's just taking a long time for the human community to catch up with the fact that what this epic legend is teaching us is that it was wrong, the way Sita was mistrusted and forced to prove her purity. Wrong, 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 and we need to retell that story. And that's how I feel, Acharya, about all the spiritual traditions. There are these beautiful gems, as we've named this incredible audio production that we've done, Sita's Gems. There are gems in every spiritual tradition, and there are toxic elements in every spiritual tradition that are rooted in this patriarchal model, which doesn't, I'm not dissing men when I say patriarchy. This is something that people of all genders carry and suffer from, is these models of purification and perfection that render us all somehow wrong, and not enough, or too much, or both at the same time. And so we need to retell the stories that have suppressed the wild and tender wisdom of the feminine. And I feel like that's what we're doing together here. But when you mention my story of loss and transformation, it definitely was not one in which I experienced a great shattering loss, which I did, the death of my teenage daughter in a car accident. A big loss, and then I go through the fire, and then I emerge transformed, or as you beautifully said, transmuted, the alchemy of grief, that it remakes us. It turns the lead into something golden. Yes, but it wasn't dramatic. I mean, death of my child was dramatic, but my process wasn't like I started off broken and I ended up whole. It was one in which, and this is where I really identify with Sita, the suffering itself was sacred. The shattering itself was whole making, paradoxically, because the feminine, the sacred feminine, has room for paradox. Not only does it have room for paradox, I think the sacred feminine in many ways is characterized by paradox. The brokenness that is wholeness, the longing for God that is in the very moment of crying out for God becomes a reunification, a union with God. And so for me, the Sita story, as my own story of grief, represents the cry of our souls for God, the really maybe illusion of separation from God, and the deep yearning, that wellspring of yearning for union, that in the very expression, the cry of longing, as Rumi calls it in the Mathnawi, the great epic poem of Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, the Persian Sufi poet, the cry of the soul becomes the answering response of love from the divine. And so Sita's cry for Ram was Ram's cry for Sita, and that energy of yearning reunited Ram and Sita, which reunified, I feel reunifies, because it's a living reality, the masculine and feminine aspects of the Godhead that are seemingly sundered, but in our longing for union are reunified. And Hanumanji is the energy of that reunification, the miraculous bridge that is built not from power, yay, I'm going to charge forth and save the day, but from our very forgetting of our power, which is what happened to Hanuman, right? He forgot that he could do anything. And his humility and his devotion built the bridge to Lanka and rescued Sita from exile. And I could give you examples across the spiritual traditions of exile and return from exile, this story of longing and reunification, of the divine marriage of masculine and feminine. But I think I've spoken enough. Thank you.
What beautiful words, Mirabaiji. And thank you for bringing Hanuman into our discussion. And for seeing him as that bridge. And would you feel, and we have Hanuman's Leap of Faith audiobook from Michael that people can go to come closer to him. But would you feel that, I know you're a deep devotee of Hanuman, that Hanuman brings you close to the heart of Sita?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up not like you two, Acharya and Nina, in India, but I grew up very close to Indian culture and spiritual traditions at the Lama Foundation, which is where us created Be Here Now in the late 60s with the Lama community. I was a child in the early 70s when I met Ram Dass and was exposed to this epic legend of the Ramayana and to Hanuman and to the other characters, Sita and Ram and Lakshman. And so in many ways, my spiritual consciousness was formed around this epic, this metaphor. And Hanuman, for me, when I was a child, the image of Hanuman tearing open his heart and Sita and Ram are dwelling in the center of his torn open heart. That's the story of my life. And I think of many of our lives, that when our hearts are shattered, we find dwelling within us the object of our heart's deepest longing. Yeah. And that union of Ram and Sita through Hanuman's deep devotion and deep grief. The heart torn open isn't just something we do on a Sunday afternoon picnic when everything's fine. That heart, I mean, in the story, he was proving his devotion, but the tearing open of the heart is something that we all experience at different times in our lives. It's almost like a co-creative dance with the divine. Like, as long as I'm going to be experiencing this sorrow, this loss, whatever it may be, I am going to show up and I'm going to participate in opening my heart. What Stephen Levine, a dear friend of mine, a late great spiritual teacher of grief and loss and death and dying, very close associate of Ram Dass, called keeping your heart open in hell. And that's what I endeavor to do when times get difficult.
I wonder, Mirabai ji, and we're going to play that recording later, her last words before she entered the earth. And if my memory supports me here, she says that may Mother Earth open up if I have been steadfast in my love and devotion of Rama. So till the last, her love of Rama did not fade, but I feel like it was like her grief became a passageway where she was no longer going to abide by the outer earthly Rama, the Rama that is engaged in, the dharma of how to be a king and what is proper, what is not proper. It was more about, like she was ready to find the Rama within her. And you talk about how your grief led you to wholeness. You found yourself whole. I wonder if, and I'm just loudly thinking here and seeing what you think. Sometimes I wonder, and these thoughts arose as you were speaking, if her journey back to earth from manifest to non-manifestation, where she's no longer amongst us, was like she chose the deeper realm of devotion from the outer engaging, holding, going back to a city, a town, a house, a bedroom, to really choosing herself with a capital S, where Ram dwells.
Yeah, that's beautiful. My favorite mystics across the spiritual traditions are the ones who talk back to God, who question the rebels, the rebel women who say, yes, I love you with all my heart. And what? Are you kidding me? No, that's not okay with me. And don't hesitate, that they winnow out their faith through an engaged process of doubt. And I feel like that is what Sita was up to all along, and especially at the end, that she was, as you say, she was peeling, well, you didn't say peeling away the layers of the false Rama, to find the real Ram. But that's, I think, what you're referring to there. And
I was. And that's profound.
yes. And in all of Sita's reckoning with her circumstances, there was never an abstraction, like, I'm going to just meditate my way up and out of this situation and merge with the formless divine. It was always deeply embodied. In that Ashoka grove, she was there was the blossoming bough, and every time she had an experience of sorrow, of pain, it was compared in some way to nature. There were all of these nature metaphors in the Sitayana, of quivering winds and elephant trunks, and everything that Sita goes through is drenched in embodied metaphors. And so the passageway to transformation is not through transcendence for Sita, it is through deep embodiment. It's not through pretending everything's going to be okay. It's through acknowledging the full truth and contours of her actual experience of grief and suffering. And it's not just embodied, it's also intellectual. She questions her situation from every possible angle and teaches us how to do that deep engagement with truth. It's a very Jewish metaphor from my ancestral tradition of wrestling and grappling, not just allowing and giving in. It's not blind faith. It's a very powerful, engaged faith that Sita demonstrates for all of us.
Thank you so much, Mirabai ji. Such compelling images arise in us as we listen to you. And I'm sure my listeners are already experiencing a permission, an inner permission to embody authenticity through whatever they're going through, especially if it's grief and pain. Because you're very right. Throughout the Ramayana, we notice her conversations with herself and with the nature. Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If you loved this episode, there's a way to show your love. Just go to acharyashunya.com and make a donation to support the production of this podcast. You can also rate, review, and share this episode with others, live on YouTube every month. Browse her online wisdom school for her latest course offerings, and thanks for listening.